Okay.
Yes, we're good. Thank you.
Then I would like to call to order the Achievement and Communications Subcommittee meeting to order at 5:33 p.m. on June 8th, 2021. In accordance with Governor McKee's Executive Order 21-59 dated May 27th, 2021, the Cumberland School Committee intends to conduct this meeting remotely. The public can participate in this meeting remotely, but not in person, by calling 1-646-558-8656, webinar ID 926-5344-2233, or they can join via Zoom by going to the Cumberland Schools website and going to the events calendar and clicking on the Zoom link. So the first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda, and again, compliance with Governor's Executive Order 21-59 dated May 27th, 2021, discussion or vote on whether there is public access to the meeting through adequate alternative means, which I believe there is.
Yes.
Thank you. So I need a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mrs. Rogalski. Second by Mr. Collins. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it, 3-0. The next item on the agenda says approval of minutes, March 9th, 2021 and May 4th, 2021. But we at the last meeting actually approved the March 9th minutes. And I think there's just a hiccup in this. So tonight we just need to approve the minutes from May 4th, 2021. So I need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mrs. Rogalski, second by Mr. Collins. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, 3-0. And the next item on the agenda is our main agenda topic tonight, review and discussion of grading policy, I-12, K-8 proficiency-based grading. Over to you, Mr. D'Amato.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, everyone. We are, in a minute or so, Mike will queue up the I-12 standards-based grading policy, but I just wanted to frame this evening for us. We started this journey about 5 years ago in the district to revamp our entire K-12 standards-based grading system. That was started 10 years ago, and 5 years ago we started the process at the high school. That took about 2 years. We're 3 years into the middle school work, and we are finally in a position where we're ready to launch in the fall. And I just want to say that it's been a long, arduous process. We are planning to move to the elementary level next and work on the elementary level, which I anticipate will be about a 3-year project. So all in all, to revamp the entire system, you're looking at about 8 years worth of work. I have to publicly acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that both Deb and Kathy have done for ELA, social studies, math, and science, respectively, among the other content areas. Lindy and Shannon are new to the team and in the process, but it is important for them to be a part of this so that they understand how the grading system interacts with the students that they support. But Kathy and Deb have done an amazing job and a tremendous amount of work driving this work every day with the content leaders at the middle school, the principals, meeting upon meeting for 3 years. And I've enjoyed doing the work with you. And if you guys have nothing to say about it, we can jump in. And I just want to also acknowledge Mike's work. He takes the baton when we're done with all of the content work, rubrics, assessments, and then he has to have it, become usable for teachers, for us, and parents. So I want to acknowledge his work on that as well. I do want to note that every rubric, every assessment has had to be redone, relooked at, realigned with the standards. And we also took a trip to the Marzano Institute, Research Institute. I think was it 2 years ago? Going on 2 years back. We went to half of the conference, or two pieces of the conference on standards reference grading. And that was a great experience. And that trip helped frame and validate a lot of the work that we've been doing over the past 5 years. So you guys have anything you want to add to that before we cue Mike?
It'll be 3 years in November when we went to Marzano.
I just want to say it was a team effort, and right, we did have a lot of meetings. I'm very thankful for the support from the content leaders who went and communicated with the teachers and then got back to us, which Deb and I have made multiple, many revisions. Again, meeting with them, meeting with Tony. We did a lot of the revisions this year because teachers were just so overwhelmed. So we actually, did most of the work with the rubrics, but it was definitely a team effort. Tony, Deb, content leaders, principals. So.
And with that, Mike, can you cue it for us? Thank you. Madam Chair, do you want to just take it in sections and just have me give up highlights, and then you guys can ask questions as we go? Is that the way you want to do it? Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I think that's good.
Okay. So what we did was the I-12 middle school grading policy as it stood it's currently still the current policy in place or approved policy by the school committee and the policy that's in practice. It is completely obsolete. The one in front of you is what's going to be proposed to the policy subcommittee in the near future. And we basically took the skeleton from the high school policy. I believe it's I-13. I'm not 100% sure. And what we did was we took that language, we put it into I-12, and then we retrofitted it. It went under many revisions. Teachers at the middle school level spent professional development days taking a look at this, providing us feedback. The principals, Jay and Beth, along with their teams, they also looked at the language, and we did our own revisions many times. I already see an error. Standards base should be based grading under the proficiency. To add that, whoever has editing rights can edit it live. So what we did was, thank you, Mike. So what we did was we stated the purpose of the grading system. And one of the keys to the first page is distinguishing between proficiency-based grading and reporting, the two different things. Grading, standards-based grading is an interaction between teachers and students where teachers measure students' performance against multiple standards in their core content areas. Reporting is how we decide to show that performance. That's merely all it is. But this policy is pretty comprehensive and tells us about what the changes are in the system and how we get to a grade. Any questions thus far? No? Okay. One of the big changes as we scroll down, Mike, to the policy is new levels of performance. So I'm not even sure what the current report card has for specific language as to how they define a 4, 3, 2, 1. But the new language is a little cleaner, starting with the 1, talk about students demonstrating a limited proficiency of grade level standards, partial proficiency, and then a complex understanding of grade level standards. And what we did was the nucleus of this operation or this grading system is Bloom's taxonomy. We really framed it around Bloom's taxonomy and connected it with the things that we learned at the Research Institute and what we read years back on a book by Tim Westberg. So those are the new levels. Another big change as we scroll down, and we know this to be true at the high school level, is we've added a plus and minus system. One of the big things that we needed to do was, student performance falls on a continuum somewhere. A student could receive a 2 and receive a 2, 2 or 3 quarters in a row or 2 semesters in a row, and it doesn't really give parents and or students feedback on whether or not they're making progress or growth. If all 9 of us took a writing assessment and we all got 3s, our strengths and our weaknesses would be different against whatever standards being measured, right? We'd fall somewhere on a continuum. And we felt as though it was important for us to really get more detailed, get more specific, and provide students with more ready, available feedback from teachers as to exactly where they are and whether they're growing or regressing with the rigor of the content as the year progresses on. So the backbone, yes, go ahead. Mrs.
Can you scroll back up to the 4 levels for a second?
Sure.
Actually, what I was doing, Tony, is I just pulled up my daughter's report card from the
Yep.
high school because it has the performance level scores across the top, and I don't know if these things need to be aligned or not, but it says, 4, it says distinguished command, 3 is strong command, 2 is moderate, and 1 is partial to no command.
Yeah,
Could be
that's the
changed.
old language. Yeah.
So would the high school report card also be updated with this new language?
All of the proficiency levels will be aligned K to 12. Yeah, so they're going to be changed.
Okay, because this policy is K through 8, so then there might need to be a
Right.
slight adjustment to the high school policy.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And again, the premise is to K-12, the heart and soul or the philosophy behind the grading system is the same. There are just going to be branches that, are more partial to high school and or middle school and or elementary, depending on, and we have to differentiate for each of those areas. But the 12-point system, the raw points that we use are the backbone of how we grade on the rubrics. A lot of times teachers are measuring multiple standards at once, and we had to find a way to take a lot of standards and funnel them in a way where teachers can accurately pinpoint how they're doing and then report that out to parents. In this numeric system, it's not a 100-point scale like we would see traditionally. It's a 0 to 12-point scale, which is drastically reduced. And it helps us more accurately figure out and be more confident about where a student's performance is on their work. One of the other goals that we wanted to accomplish is we want to see a correlation between the grades that kids are getting in school and their performance on and proficiency in grade level standards on standardized tests. There's no correlation and we have inflated grades on report cards, then we are not doing our jobs. We are, basically providing information that is inaccurate. And inflated grades eventually will catch up, and what you'll see is a bottleneck at the high school, and eventually those gaps for students will show up. Any questions thus far? No. Kath, do you want to take the learner qualities on this? You did most of the work on the learner qualities, or you and Deb. I didn't really get involved in this.
So it's similar to the high school that we went with only 2 categories. And this rubric that you see will be for the teachers, but it won't appear in the high school report card. It will just be work ethic and citizenship. This year they went to 3. The middle school, they made a few changes. They also had collaborative worker, but we put collaborative worker back into the work ethic. So they're just getting 2 learner qualities. There are some changes in the language, and most of the changes in the language was based on feedback from teachers. So it might look a little tiny bit different than the high school. There was one, can you scroll down a little bit? That was, I think the only thing we took out that we had a little bit of a discussion about was the dress code, because that's become kind of a controversial issue. But it says something about following all school rules. So we figured that covered that. But other than that, it's like I said, it's the bullets are a little bit different based on feedback from teachers. Anything else, Deb? I know you had a lot of feedback from the ELA teachers.
No, I haven't, not about this in particular.
Well, one of them was the one who gave me most of the feedback on here.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
made the changes.
Yeah.
Any questions from the panel? Can keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the comprehensive assessment system part is, the heart and soul of how we measure.
student performance. So it's really important. And all we did was we felt it was really important to, in policy, define all the different types of assessments that we give and how they operate within the context of the system. We define summatives, progress assessments, what they are. The language that the district was used to using was formative assessments. They were, I guess, improperly using the term. By definition, formative assessments shouldn't be graded as it pertains to standards-based grading. So we took formative assessments and we made sure that we framed the language so that teachers and parents and students know that formative assessments are really those ongoing assessments that happen in the classroom. Teachers are gauging where students are, gauging whether or not they have to reteach certain parts of the lesson, go back and review information. It's their way of keeping a checkpoint on where kids are. Progress and summatives. Progress assessments are smaller types of tidbits of assessments that help us understand where kids are in units of study along the way, and they should always funnel to the summative assessments. They should always connect in some way to the larger content. They should not be disconnected. Then we go on to define on-demand extended tasks, because those are all things that kind of happen within the context depending on the content area. That's what makes this work so challenging. Science is so different from math and so on and so forth. The determination of proficiency in arriving at an academic grade, we basically have revamped all of the proficiencies. In other words, in ELA, rather than historically outlining all of the standards that we cover, there are so many of them in each content area that it's too cumbersome in a report card when we're reporting that information out. So what we did was we outlined and identified proficiencies in each of the content areas to simplify all of the standards. So the teachers and the students live in the complex world of standards and understanding where they are and how they're doing. When it's reported out, I'll give you an example. In ELA, it's reported out as writing, analysis, reading comprehension, and writing, analysis.
Communications.
Right.
Communications, yeah.
Thank you. In math, do you want to talk about the proficiencies in math? Or a little different?
Yeah, the math is the math domains according to the Common Core standards, because in math, they're not year-long standards. So you might touch upon something until you get to the high school where you take specific courses, but in the middle school, there's statistics and statistics and probability, geometry, expressions and equations, ratios and proportions. So those are the categories that they'll be scored in math, because like I said, sometimes it's typically in math, some things they do come back to, but they only cover certain domains in each trimester.
So what we also try to do is align social studies proficiencies with the language arts. They grade content, obviously, because social studies is such a content-driven core content area, but we tried to align the reading comprehension, the analysis, the writing to ELA language arts, and we made that connection. That was a big move for us.
And the only other shift in social studies is they have a presentation rubric, where in ELA they have a communication rubric more based on Socratic seminar. And they're not presenting, they're just discussing.
Thanks, Deb.
Yeah, and the science, the proficiencies are the same throughout. It's just for different strands of science, but it's conceptual understanding, investigative practices, and communication. And then it will just be depending if they're doing earth science, life science, or what am I missing? Earth, space, whatever this, 3 different domains, but the proficiencies like ELA and social studies are the same throughout.
And what I want to do at this moment is give you an example of what was bad about our current system, or what currently is bad about our current system, versus how we try to fix it and get it to mean more and represent more accurately what our students are capable of doing. When you buy boxed programs like we had for ELA at the middle school level and even at the elementary level, which we haven't gotten to yet. Their boxed assessments were sometimes 8 pages long, extremely measuring so many standards. And one of the things that I noticed as a parent, because of the nature of what I do, is how could a teacher possibly accurately, not teacher's fault, the assessment design was flawed. How could a teacher possibly accurately gauge how a student is doing within the standards when every assessment is 8 or 9 pages long and they have to pinpoint where these kids are? It was poorly designed. The rubrics were extremely wordy. In math, students would be, points would be taken off, or proficiency would be impacted negatively if they didn't use specific strategies that the math program called for students to use, and that's a flaw in and of itself. Students should be able to use any strategies to demonstrate proficiency. So those things seem like real simple little things, but they're actually quite impactful, and they're really big things, and they're hard things to change. So when we say we have to realign everything, that's what we're talking about. So assessments needed to be redesigned, and those rubrics had to be tested. They were field tested. Our teachers field tested them. They came back, told us what worked, what didn't work, what they were uncomfortable with, and we went back and forth multiple times until we were happy with the product. And it's going to always be ongoing. What we do in this office is constant revision and evolution.
The assessments, in the previous section, I'm familiar with that because that's what we're doing at the high school.
Yep.
But what are we doing currently at the middle school? Because I feel like when I left the middle school, they had introduced the 1, 2, 3, 4, and they had introduced, I think, the formative and the summatives. Maybe I can't quite remember. But what's the bridge that needs to be, the gap that needs to be bridged between the current state in the middle school and this new standards-based grading?
So do you guys want to attempt to answer that from
No,
the content
you go,
perspective?
Tony.
You
You
want me to-
go. Yes.
I'm trying to get a sense of how big of a change this will be for parents, and of course for students, but just understanding that.
It's largely simplified. The biggest thing that we've done is rather than report out on 10, 12 different standards in each content area, what we've done is we've held on to what we call standards of emphasis in each of those content areas. And we've said, teachers, you got to focus on these and you got to go real deep into these. And then we'll let parents know based on these proficiencies how they're doing. So when I get my daughter's report card at the middle school level starting next year when she's in 6th grade, I'm going to be able to gauge, okay, she's has a 3+ in reading comprehension. That's strong performance. She's got a 2+ in analysis. And what that tells me in this system is she's able to comprehend grade level text, and she's able to demonstrate that comprehension at a strong level. What she's incapable of doing, or not capable of doing it at grade level expectations, is to provide the analysis necessary to achieve that higher grade. So like I said before, we look at it from a Bloom's taxonomy. It's what we call an I can system. Students, if they are operating at a 1, it's a very basic level understanding, if you want to think about it that way. At level 2, they're demonstrating understanding, but they're not applying yet. At a level 3, they're starting to apply what they know, which is really important. And that's the target for kids. We want to get them to apply. 4th piece is the analysis piece. And that's the higher level piece that we're looking to push kids. So that's the premise and the backbone of the system. When you're talking about the biggest change for parents, you're going to see the plus and minuses. You're going to have students who are going to show progress and regression within the standards as the year goes on. You say, well, why is that important? It's important because as the year goes on and rigor and content become more difficult, are they keeping up with the rigor of the content? Are they keeping up with that? Are they growing with that? continuum, or are they stagnant in that continuum? So we feel that that's more significant information that we're providing parents as the curriculum progresses. And it's also motivational for kids, because now they're not just looking at a stagnant 2 all the time. You know, they could very easily grow from a 2 to a 2+ or 3-, and there's room for growth, positive reinforcement. It gives teachers opportunities to give students that feedback. So I would say that those are the big highlights. And the last big one is the accuracy. When a grade comes in front of you, I'm going to be more comfortable with the accuracy of that grade and the validity and the reliability of that grade.
Well, and just to add to that, from a parent's perspective, instead of seeing all the standards on the report card and ELA and social studies, you're just going to see 4 proficiencies. And as Tony said, the pluses and minuses. So that those proficiencies will look different than the high school proficiencies.
Mm-hmm. Will they also have letter grades? Because we have that at the high school, the grades by, we see all the proficiencies. I mean, the standards, I think is what and then the ratings, the 3+, the 4+, the B+, the 2+ or whatever. But then we also see an equivalent grade overall. Will it be that way at the middle school?
It will not. If you notice in the policy, we do not have the grade equivalent letter grade. Cumberland, we have to decide as a community what we want to be. If we're going to be a standards and committed to a standards-based grading system, we've got to live in the land of 1, 2s, 3s, and 4s, and that's the way those grading systems are built. I've always said it doesn't matter. You can grade in emojis. You can report out in emoji faces. It doesn't really matter. The important part is how students and teachers are interacting and how teachers are measuring their performance. But there are no plans to use letter grades. I think at the high school, that decision was made, I guess, because of the traditionalists that wanted to keep that in place. The nature of the high school with the higher stakes that are involved with class rank and all of those things come into play. So we wanted to keep it at measuring proficiency against standards and not assigning a letter grade to a student's performance, because it tells a little bit of a different story.
Mr. Collins?
I just want to say one thing about the grading system also. I think, at least in math, the kids get more of the feedback on the rubrics. There's a lot of information on the rubrics. In fact, they'll find out if they're struggling with more concept development, application, procedural accuracy. Whereas when they look at the report card, it will just be 1 grade when it comes to, like I said, geometry or statistics and probability. The feedback, though, will be separated. They won't just get 1 grade on an assessment based on how many items they got correct. It'll be, the teacher will correct it, give feedback, and then look, do they understand this concept? Can they apply the concept? Are they struggling with the algorithms, the procedural accuracy? So the feedback is right on the rubric and not as much information, I guess, on the report card.
The rubrics are behind the scenes, as Tony so aptly puts it, but they're available, if a parent is interested. And as Kathy said, the feedback part is critical for student growth.
Someone else have a question? I can only see a few people.
If I may, I think at the high school, since the middle school and elementary aren't using letter grades now, and I don't actually, the daughter going into 8th grade, I don't think I ever remember a letter grade. It's always been standard based. So I think if you're going to train, the issue with the high school is less about standards-based grading and more about, I think, the perception of how colleges will view the transcript. You know what I mean? So if you're applying to a tier 1 school and you don't have A+, A+, so I think part of the issue is that the college admissions people need to get on board too. And I think, obviously, as this changes, I think that will kind of rectify itself as well. But I think if we're going to move to a standards base at the high school and eliminate the letter grade, as it sounds like you're making a case for, because it's kind of draconian, or I guess archaic at this point, I think the kids coming up now don't know what a letter grade is. Because I always say when I first looked at it, I'm like, well, is this an A? Is it a B? And, I've had to kind of get hip to this just on the fly. So I think that works as well. The only question I have is, though, when I get notifications like a few minutes ago from Aspen from a teacher, it doesn't come across as a number. If my child scores strong, I believe that's 3, correct? Exemplary is 4. Somewhat proficient is 2.
Yeah, I think it's strong command, distinguished command, partial command. Yeah.
Oh, that's what, yeah,
That language is changing, as we said in the beginning.
okay, because as long as it can match, because I'm like,
Yeah.
Strong command's good, I guess. But okay, all right, now I understand. Thank you.
That's why we changed it to say proficient on grade level standards, so that it's very clear that a 3 means that your child is proficient on grade level standards, meaning they're performing at a high level. When you're talking about getting to a 4, and you're talking about complex understanding, you're talking about your child grappling with information on a whole nother level, and that's what we wanted to convey. And students have an opportunity to run the gamut within this system. In a traditional letter-based system, you get an A or a B. B means why didn't you get an A? But a 3 says something very different. It says that you are proficient in grade level standards. You're providing strong evidence that you have a grasp on multiple standards within your content area that you're reporting out on, and that's a complex thing. The other thing is traditionally the 100-point scale, or the traditional scale on 100 points is typically when we were in school, everybody got marked down from 100. You'd have 10 questions on a quiz, you get 3 wrong, it was a 70. But it didn't really tell us whether or not we could have demonstrated that we knew certain things really, really well. Could have made some really minor errors and gotten a 70. It didn't accurately tell you what we actually could really do. Minor errors in a standards-based grading system is actually quite student-friendly. Minor errors will not impact the large evidence body in a major way, the way it would in a traditional system. That's why we'd like to call it an ICANN system.
And the other thing in ELA and social studies, the DOK level determines a lot. So we've really pushed teachers' thinking around developing DOK questions of more complexity rather than just DOK 1 questions.
Yeah, and I just want to add too, I teach writing, and one of the challenges I've always had is, like math is very objective. You know what I mean? You grade the steps or whatever, but ultimately you either get the right or the wrong answer. You know what I mean? So, but with writing, it's very subjective, so you try to make it as objective as possible. And I think when you're looking at standards, if you break in 5-paragraph essay, 6-8 paragraph essay down into specific benchmarks the student has to meet, because I remember in college one time I got a paperback and it was like B+ on top, and I'm like, there was no feedback, there was nothing. It was incredibly subjective based on the professor's assessment of my writing, but there was no feedback.
Mm-hmm.
When I grade, I always have certain benchmarks with evidence, and and then I have a little section for spelling and grammar and syntax and all that other stuff. But if the kid has one bad paragraph, he or she can still do very well on the rest of the essay, instead of just when the introduction doesn't destroy the rest of the essay. So I think it's good, and I think it really helps, and I think it does create that kind of objective grading and kind of immediate feedback for a student. And I just want to add that I think it's really important as well to provide that feedback in a timely manner. And at least at the elementary and middle school levels, I've seen that the teachers are very good about grading, not grading it 2 weeks out. They strike while they aren't taught. So you sit your child down and go, what's going on with this? Oh, I just wrote this the other day, and they can immediately go back and reflect on what they did well and what they didn't do. So that's important as well. So I think it's going to be kind of an easy transition.
That's I think Mr. Collins made a really good earlier point. I mean, I was at the middle school when we changed from letter grades to numerical grades, and there was, like, if you all remember, outrage by the parents and a lot of pushing back on that. So that's why I asked the question, but it sounds like they're already used to this. This is not a huge change. And I think when even at the high school level. I mean, when you think about the 12-point scale, even when you in college, it is the letter grade turns into a numerical thing to figure out your GPA and all of that. So, yeah, I think seems like it will work just fine. Amy?
Thanks. So first, let me say I'm a huge fan of this. I think it's fantastic. I love the 12-point scale because it allows that flexibility for grading as a former teacher. It's fantastic. My question, I have stuff written on Post-it notes. I hope I can remember what I meant. My question has to do kind of with the implementation of this. You know, in the last paragraph there, we talk about the rubrics define the criteria. Teachers must work to understand and agree on the definitions of performance level. Have those, and it's possible you said this and I just didn't understand it, but has that already happened in the district? Like, is there already a developed rubric common to all of the teachers across the schools? This is the plus, this is a regular, this is a minus. Does that already exist, or are they going to have to come up with that once this is implemented?
Everything already exists for every content area. That includes all of the special areas. So everything has been revamped. Art, PE, music, all of the rubrics have been redone under the new system. Our content leaders have gone over the rubrics with the teachers on professional development days. And we've had that back and forth that both Deb and Kathy were talking about, where there have been revisions, things that they didn't particularly care for or understand where we were coming from, tested them on some of the current assessments to look at usability, you know, and the only way that we're going to have a widespread launch is in the fall, when everyone gets a chance to use those rubrics. But there is synergy where everybody's starting at once. We're not launching with one content area and others are lagging behind. We wanted to get to the point where everybody starts at the gate at the same time and they're all ready to go.
Right. And kind of going along with what Dennis said too, because some areas are more subjective and because we know teachers grade differently, you can have the same class and totally different grades. I foresee issues between, you know, a 3 minus and a 2+, you know, just that. And so I wonder if you guys have thought, and I know there is the rubric, so that makes me feel better. Have you thought about almost having, and this sounds weird and I don't know if that would work, but almost having the high school teachers maybe mentor the middle school teachers and how to make that decision between a minus and a plus? Because all the parents will see is the grade. You know, they'll just see the number. They'll just see a 2, where maybe they were right on the border. And I can see the teachers are going to have a really hard time knocking a kid down to a 2+ from a 3-. And maybe that's just, I mean, I'm just thinking you don't want to do that. And I'm wondering if teachers are going to kind of skew positive. And so I just wonder, from teachers who have already done this, even though there is the rubric there, I don't know, some kind of connection with the middle school teachers to just, or maybe the curriculum coordinators, you guys can do it, just to kind of give guidance on, oh, you all got big, on that fine line that's right there. And I don't know if that makes sense. And I'm sure you guys all know this better than I do, but I can see that being a potential issue where teachers
so next year, a couple things are going to happen in ELA. Woo! We're changing. And so we're going to be able to meet on Tuesdays throughout the year for PD days. I mean, for PD sessions. And I think the point of inter-rater reliability, sitting down and looking at the rubrics of reading comprehension and especially writing, are going to be important. The writing has had a lot of inter-rater reliability. The 20-point scale, we've done it for 4 or 5 years. We get the anchor papers from RICAS and we use them. So that is, they know what that looks like. We'll look at the RICAS samples from this year and we'll do the same. But the idea of the teams meeting, because there's small teams in the middle school, right? Because you only have 4 ELA teachers, and for them to get together is much easier than elementary. So that work, I think, Mrs. Rogalski, has to be ongoing. But there's already, teachers currently grading differently. But I want to bring to your attention that when I met with the social studies team, they feel really strongly about doing some work together next year across schools and within grade levels and within schools.
You also have to remember that the system is actually designed. The reason why we work off of a 12-point system is if a student gets an 8, a 9, a 10, and an 11 on an assessment, the average of those 4, when you put them together, is a 9.5. So the precision comes within the numeric system. It's shrunken. So people say, well, I thought you're not supposed to average on standards-based grading systems. Well, all we were doing in the past system is when teachers have this big body of evidence, Mr. Collins was talking about subjectivity. It's really, really hard to look at 20, 30 pieces of evidence and objectively say, this is where they are on these particular standards. I don't care how good of a teacher you are, it's very difficult to do. So by putting in this point system, when they assign a specific point to whatever that performance level is, when it all shakes out numerically, if it comes out to a 9.5, it's a 3+. And now, if the student has demonstrated where the teacher discretion comes in, is if they've shown a tremendous amount of growth and progress, and that 9.5 is actually indicative, or really it was teeter-tottering on that 4-, that 10. Teachers do have the discretion based on evidence, if they can prove it, to give that grade. But it is meant to be more precise and less subjective, and that's why we went to the numeric system. Because right now, if I'm not trying to be negative or anything, but when my daughter gets a grade and it's just a solid 3, it's hard to decipher what's that based on. Where's is that connected to? Is that the equivalent of another 3 in a class? Where is it? Now, if she comes home next year in the middle school and she comes home with a 9.5 or a 3+, there's more precision to that, and I can follow and funnel that precision as a parent to where it came from. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think it's the rubrics. And you're right. Once you see the rubrics, it'll make more sense. And like the 20-point system for grading the essays, so for math, obviously the most important thing is that they understand the concept. So let's say they got a 3 for understanding the concept, but they're making a lot of calculation errors. That might bring them to a 3- because their procedural fluency isn't there. Or when they have to communicate something, their communication is unclear. That might bring it to a -, but they're still going to live in that 3 world because they understand the concept. So that's how that one's kind of, but yes, it will take time for teachers, PD time, spending time together during PD days and meetings and working together so that they're all grading consistently.
And we've done mock gradings. Yeah, go ahead.
The other thing that will be new are the progress assessments. And in ELA and social studies, the progress assessments funnel into reading comprehension. And they're not a 70-30 weight. They're going to be equal to a summative.
Yeah, so what they're referring to is we've naturally weighted things within the rubric. So concepts that are more, the student does really well on the important concepts, they're going to live in the land of proficiency. If they're making minor, algebraic mistakes, things, we've accommodated for the weight of that, so we don't have high stakes assessments at the middle school level, right? We wanted to try and stay away from that world, so we kind of count everything equally. Whereas at the high school level, I think it's a 70-30 split. Some of it's progress assessments.
So progress assessments, that concept will be new at the middle school. They have. Yes. What do they have? Formatives and summatives now? Do they?
Correct.
Okay, so they'll have PAs and essays.
Right.
Future.
Formatives are still in play, but they don't get graded.
Mm-hmm.
And Tony, this is not necessarily related to this topic, but thinking about the high school, and if there isn't an answer, that's okay. We've got the summatives, the PAs and the essays, and the kids really understand all of that. But then we have midterms and finals, except we don't have that this year. So how does the concept of a midterm or a final play into this concept of standards-based grading and essays, PAs and essays?
In particular at the high school level? So
Yeah.
I remember this was going back now about 4 years when we were doing that work with them. I remember that midterms and finals were in, were out, were in, were out. They were, and the teachers had decided that at the time, I remember the content leaders, I believe, had decided that they wanted to reintegrate them as another opportunity for students to show proficiency within the standards. And I think that the weight of those, if I'm not mistaken, I thought they were kicking around like 15% of the total grade of some sort. They were going to apply that opportunity somehow to give kids another opportunity. One of the challenges at the high school level, from what I remember, and it'll probably be a challenge at the middle school level, is the frequency of assessment. You know, depending on the content, are they giving one? We had to put minimums in place to progress assessments. We couldn't have 15 ELA teachers, some giving 1, some giving 4 progress assessments, and a few kids getting 2 grades, and other kids are getting 5 grades to arrive at the derivative of the final grade that they're getting. So to answer your question as simply as I can is from what I remember, they decided to bring it in under the auspices that it would be another opportunity in that semester for students to demonstrate summatively what they have learned and hopefully help them along the way, give them another opportunity.
It'll be interesting to see if we revisit that, considering what we've done this year with no midterms and no finals. And so, you know, like my daughter's got, you know, she knows right now, okay, in math, I know I have 2 PAs and an essay left for this year, you know, or I've got to do 1 PA and 1 essay in English. And she's, you know, counting down the days until she can get out. But there's no finals. So I just think it's very interesting. And I think it's maybe this pandemic is going to give us a new way to think about that too.
Yeah, one of the hardest things for us, not to, you know, beat a dead horse here, but one of the common themes that you're hearing from us is we're extremely intimately involved in the assessment design, right? Each assessment we see, we put our eyes on it, we test it, we field test it, we go back, right? This is, like I said at the beginning, arduous work, right? So I don't know what the test designs look like at the high school. I have no idea. I have no idea what their rubrics look like. All we know is we put the standards-based grading system in place, and we rely on the content leaders who are excellent to do quality control there. But we don't review those, so it's hard for us to say tangibly what that assessment represents and how does it measure what they're trying to measure. Does that make sense? Yeah. Mike, was that towards the end of the policy? Are we like there?
Yeah, I can bring up there's 1 page left that's on it.
Okay.
My system bumped me out for a second. That's why it went and came back in.
So the plan, Tony, is that this policy goes to the policy subcommittee to
Correct.
get discussed and voted on, and then ultimately to the whole committee. And what is your timing? What is your?
Well, right now, we just have to get the policy approved before the fall, before the first, you know, because if you think about it, grading doesn't start. We have a buffer of time. I just wanted to make sure it was on the radar and have, you know, publicly some type of meeting where parents understand that the shift is coming, especially incoming, you know, 5th grade students into 6th grade and so on, parents that already exist in the middle school. So Mark is already aware. I did talk to him about the policy and we'll get it scheduled. And I think the biggest thing for them is that the policy that's there is we're not changing the name of the policy. We've just stricken all of the content within the old I-12 and replaced it in its entirety. But timetable wise, we're okay. If we get this approved, you know, before we start school, we'll be okay.
Okay.
The work is done. The work is, you know, so we're okay.
Okay.
And I think that's it, Mike. If this is the last, one of the things that is important is zeros. There's a 0 on the scale, and the 0 does come into play for work non-rendered now, and it factors into student grades. So there's been a big push on the part of teachers where accountability for student work, kids not handing in things. If a student hands in things, even if it's late, they have to grade it. In a standards-based grading system, they have to assign a grade to it. If it's extremely late, like we're talking 2 weeks late, they can achieve proficiency on that, but they cannot exceed proficiency on something that is, multiple, 2-3 weeks late. If students refuse to do work, zeros will accrue against the average, but the impact of a 0 on 100, if I get 100 and a 0, my average is a 50, I fail in the old system, right? In this system, if I get a 0 and a 12, I have the ability, I just, didn't do an assignment, I blew off an assignment, I got a 0. Now my average is a 6. It's actually a 2-. I'm not failing. So the impact of a shrunken scale is considerable. It doesn't take a student out of the game, but it puts a student on notice that if you're not doing your work, that's when this system can turn against you. And teachers were adamant, their feedback around having that as part of the system, and it makes sense. When in Tim Westberg's book, it did talk about that being okay in a standards-based grading system, the hybrid system. So we implemented that. Any comments on that? I thought that was important to note. Sometimes people say, well, they wouldn't take my child's work. It was late. No, they can take the work. They have to take the work. They have to grade the work. They have to measure it against the rubric. They can't exceed proficiency. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Student performance, gradebook reporting. Mike is working now with the coordinators, with the principals on coding everything for Aspen, making sure that all the courses are in Aspen. The new proficiencies are in Aspen, and there are discussions about what parents will see and all of that stuff. So that's where we hand the baton off to IT and have him work with the principals and on that stuff. And that's pretty much it, soup to nuts. But there was nothing in the old policy that really applied.
It does seem like a very student-friendly policy.
Try to make it's about what we can do. We shouldn't be, what we found was a lot of our assessments were these big, long assessments that are requiring all of this analysis. And we said, well, wait a minute, if we give well-balanced assessments, we can measure on a scale what they can do. At what point is the breakdown happening? If we don't know that specifically, then how can we help them grow from that point? So that's why we based it on Bloom's taxonomy. I think it's a more intelligent way of approaching standards-based grading, because it's about what they can do. It's not about marking kids down for what they can't do. We have to have a positive system in place.
Well, kudos to all of you for this tremendous amount of work that you've gone through to get us to this point to be able to implement. That's an incredible accomplishment. Any other questions or comments from Amy or Dennis? Okay, and I guess Amy and Dennis, do you see this being a difficult transition for the middle school? It sounds like it's going to be pretty.
No, I don't. I said that earlier. I don't see this as a difficult transition.
Yeah.
You're just adding, the answer is no.
Good. Okay.
I mean, we know parents will always object. Someone will always object, but no, it's. I don't know anyone that could really look at this and say that it's not good if they actually pay attention to what it says. And there's no way it's not helping their students.
Yeah.
And it's also not something like a revolutionary complete 180 based on what we're doing. It's just an extension of what
Yeah.
we've been in place, a more detailed, more accurate assessment. What's the feedback been from the teachers, though? Is my question. When it comes to the grading, more cumbersome for grading? Do they like it? Because we've talked about student administration, but I am curious to what the teachers think about this.
Kathy, Deb, do you want to talk about it? You're interacting with them every
I think
day.
because they were, for the most part, partners in this. Like I said, we worked a lot with the content leaders. The content leaders would bring it back to the teachers. They gave us feedback. We made the changes based on the feedback, that they're all on board. So I think the only thing they're a little, and I could be wrong, a little concerned about that we're working on with Mike is what it's going to look like in Aspen. But we're working on that.
Okay.
Yeah, we tried to keep them part of the process. One last thing to pull Lindy and Shannon sort of into this is one of the challenges that we face in grading is students who are, and we're going to be facing more of this with learning loss, students who are multiple grade levels behind, reporting out on students, ELL students, multilingual learner students, students with IEPs. If they're, working on grade level texts that are 1 or 2 grade levels behind the grade that they're in, that's their instructional level. And they're being graded at grade level content standards. It's one of the biggest challenges we face as to how this grade authentically measures up to this grade here. So that's one of the things that we're going to have to work through. It's going to take us some time to talk that through. That's one of the big question marks, I think, in any standards-based grading system, not just ours, but anywhere, is, does my daughter's grade of a 3 mean the same as a 3 here, where they measured apples to apples? And when it's done with support, that's fine. When we ask kids to do something independently and they can't, and they, with that, if they're doing that with support and they're getting grade X and the text is 2 grade levels below where they are, now what? That's an open-ended debate and a hard one. So I'm sure Shannon and Lindy will help us muddle through that.
And in terms of if you look at the policy, Tony's right. Students have time to make up their work, but the language for the extended task, they have 3 school days to make up their work. And work submitted late will lose 1 whole point on the 4-point scale.
I think that's it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And thank you again for all of this really, really great work. The next item on the agenda is future topics. And Tony, I kind of look to you in some cases on this in terms of what's the priority of what we need to be looking at or should be looking at over the course of the next couple of months. And I think, we had on here the ESSER 2 decisions. We're still ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, still, understanding what all that means. I don't know if that is something that, you'd like this committee to, weigh in on or just be informed about.
What we should probably do is right now, they're knee deep in that work right now. You see Deb shaking her head. There are hundreds and hundreds of entries on ESSER. But what we could do at some point is definitely, before we finalize it, it's due July 1 to the state.
Oh,
So
right the
we feel, I'm sorry?
I said that's right around the corner.
It is. That's why we're knee deep in that right now. We have that plus our normal federal grants, Title 1 through 4, and so on, that we're working on, that we have to get in on time as well. But it wouldn't hurt for you all to know what positions made the cut. Remember, we're working within a budget, and the business office was giving us the average salary with benefits on how much would each teacher impact on average the grant. And we have We've got the numbers today. So we've got to figure out how many positions we get in, what gets left out, so you can see what gets left out. So that may be a good starting point. The other thing that over the summertime with the transition with Dr. Thornton coming in, I spent a lot of my July working on leadership stuff, transitioning to the retreats, looking at the landscape of our district, where we're ending off, where we need to go. And lastly, the strategic plan. I have about 12 things on my board that need to go on the strategic plan for Phil. And I already texted him with it and said, when you come in and you start getting asked about strategic plan, we've got to jump on it. So those are the things that are in the immediate future, with the additional curricular things. The high school starting their curricular journey, starting July 1. They've had to assign ELA and math teams because they're starting their work with instruction partners. So there's a lot of things going on in a short summer. So we're definitely busy.
Amy?
Just down the road, I would love, once Lindy and Shannon have some input, I would really like an update, just how you're working to change the rubric up for those learners. So I would just, down the road, when that's more settled.
Okay. Dennis?
I mentioned this before. We say, and obviously this is not a pressing matter, but we spent a lot of time talking about RICAS and data around that, and mandates and everything. But I'd like to see a presentation about the SATs, something more data driven, and something that doesn't have to include Mr. Damana, but the AP teachers themselves. AP teachers should, in theory, be looking at data themselves based on very similar benchmarks, whether it's history or chemistry or calculus. They look at that data and they have to be able to, are we meeting this benchmark? What are we doing? Are they formative assessments, summative assessments? So the kind of light bulb went on in my head, because we were just alluding to parents who want to get the students in certain schools, but if kids are taking AP, we have to make sure that our resources are being used correctly, so they're getting the best potential AP score we're offering. We're giving them the best chance at getting that 5 on the AP exam. So that's something I'd like to see, but obviously with COVID and all of the transitions going on, but I think that's something that we should be able to do once the AP scores come out. Because I've seen, I've seen a lot of AP, like AP kids are great. They do everything you ask them to do, but you know what I mean? But there's not funding tied with AP. There's not. So I just want to make sure. I'd like to hear from the AP teachers individually. It may require more meetings, but I'm open for that too.
Yeah,
we can have Kate McMorrow. We can have, Madam Chair, and Mr. Collins, we can have Kate McMorrow arrange that directly with you guys, where you can have an achievement meeting on that. That's not a problem.
Yeah, that would be great. We did something like that a few years ago, and we were trying to look at correlations between AP grades and AP exams. And there, and I think they've been doing some work on that, but I think there was a disconnect there where you may be performing high in the AP class, but not on the exam.
Yeah, a student shouldn't be receiving an A in AP economics and receiving a 1 on the AP exam. So, and so that's clearly not a rigorous enough class, or they're doing stuff that's
to your point, exactly what we try to do with the grading system. You said it. If your daughter comes home with a 3 on her report card and she's getting a 2 or a 1 on RICAS, big problem. Yeah. Good point.
Great.
All right.
Amy.
One last, I feel like my questions are always silly, which is why I don't ask them. But is there any concern over the next few years as teachers are shuffled, as classrooms are shuffled, as students are shuffled and out of their norm, that it's going to impact the achievement of the students, of the elementary school kids, as they're moving for 1 year and moving for another year, or as the high school teachers are traveling and no longer have a room? And is there any worry about that anywhere? I mean, I know our teachers are great, and I know the kids are super flexible and they go with the flow, but it's just something that I was thinking about. I don't know if anyone is worried about that, or if not really, because again, they do go with the flow so well.
You're meaning, Amy, because of the
with the construction, like teachers, my son's talking about how his I think his social studies teacher is like, oh yeah, I have to travel next year with a cart. I don't have a room. And, just with the kids moving in the building and out of the building. And I just wonder if there's any worry about that, or if we all think that they're going to be just fine.
Of course, I think it's both. I think, they'll have a transitional period where, things will be unsettled for each school, because each school is going to funnel through that transitional building. And we have talked about it in our office about it negatively impacting achievement. It's just another layer on top of the other things that we're going to be dealing with. And what it'll do is, in my opinion, it'll just add to the amount of time it takes us to kind of get out of this hole, but we definitely are concerned about it. We'll have to watch it closely. We'll have to watch the data, what it does, what is the data telling us now, and then look at Cumberland Hills data really closely throughout the year next year and see if they're vastly different. What's the pattern, And then we can make projections for other schools. It's a good question.
Okay. All right. So the next item on the agenda is public comments. I don't think we have anybody from the public here, but if you're on the phone, *6 and unmute.
We had one person earlier, they've dropped off.
Okay. Okay, then the next item on the agenda is adjournment. I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 6:39 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Looks like the rain held out for prom, so.